Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I'm so glad that you joined us this morning because we have an exciting show in store for you coming up in the 7 o'clock hour during the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. We are going to be talking to Elisa and Robert from Colonial Days in Paint and Post. Colonial Days in Paint and Post is back. It's been back a few years now. We're going to hear about all the festivities that are coming up next week, and it's not too late to get involved. Elisa, you remember Elisa from being on the program with Sylvia. She's in charge of the what's the official term for it? I'm drawing a blank. Pageant. Thank you. Colonial Days pageant. I say thank you like there's anybody else here talking to me. She's going to be joining us talking about that because it's not too late to register. First off, on the program, this is a comment that we received yesterday after the show, and I think it's a really important comment from a viewer because I've heard this from so many people, and I think it's one of the reasons why the Corning Paint and Post school budget failed to get to the 60%. I think 97% of the school budgets in New York State passed. Corning Paint and Post was not one of them. Well, good morning, Frank. Good morning. I would like to comment on the Corning Paint and Post budget. I'm all for a first-class education since I have 6 grandchildren in the school district. But what I don't want to do is lose my property. Seniors on fixed incomes cannot afford them. Exempt school taxes for seniors over 65 would be a good start, and get rid of administrative positions and keep resource officers to protect our children and teachers. And I've heard this sentiment from quite a few people about losing their property, where you have just taxes in New York State in general so high. To continue to add on to that burden, it was just too far of a bridge to cross for many of the voters, as we saw. As a matter of fact, it almost lost outright. I think the last number I saw was less than 20 votes that the yes received over the no, but they needed to get to that 60% plus one. And we're going to keep you updated. I know they're going to propose another budget, and then we'll vote on that on June 18th. If you were in the Corning Paint and Post School District, we'll see how that goes, how much changes. So thank you for that comment, and I understand, unfortunately. That's why so many people have talked about the 5-year plan in New York, potentially moving out, or the just I am moving out, which we've received those comments from numerous viewers through the year. Okay, we're going to move along because we have so much to get to. First of all, a couple of updates to start off the program. We kind of predicted this on the show, and I know this is a weird story, but there was that plot to sell Graceland a couple weeks ago, and it was so weird that it piqued our curiosity. And we talked about it. Well, it started to seem like maybe some type of thief got a little too big for their britches and didn't realize who they were dealing with, which was the estate of Elvis Presley. And that's what we're learning, according to DNYUZ.com. The writer said he was an identity thief, a ringleader on the dark web, with a network of worms placed throughout the United States. In an email to the New York Times, he said his ring preyed on the dead, the unsuspecting, and the elderly, especially those from Florida and California, using birth certificates and other documents to discover personal information that aided in their schemes. The person said, "We figure out how to steal, that's what we do." Well, recently, the writer suggested the group had turned its attention to major targets, and that's exactly what happened with the estate of Lisa Marie Presley. Media outlets often receive unsolicited emails from people who make outlandish claims, but this email arrived Friday in response to one sent by the Times to an email address that they listed in a legal filing. In its email, the Times referred to the company's claim that Miss Presley had borrowed $3.8 million from this group using Graceland as collateral. In the responses, which came from the email address, the writer described the foreclosure effort not as a legitimate attempt to collect on debt, but as a scam. "I had fun figuring this one out, and it didn't succeed very well," the email writer said. He said he is based in Nigeria, and his email was written in Luganda. But the filing with the email address was faxed from a toll-free number designed to serve North America, so there is still some questions. But that's what it really sounded like. Perhaps an identity thief that did not understand perhaps the power behind the Presley name. So just wanted to give you that update. If we hear anything else about it, I suppose we can continue to fill you in. Yesterday we brought to you on the show where Hillary Clinton, who throughout the years has blamed so many people and groups and individuals and just so many levels and so many factors as to why she lost the 2016 race. Well, yesterday we heard that it was women, that she had to be so perfect that when James Comey reopened the investigation into her email server, she said women left her because she was not perfect. And a woman has to be perfect just in general, but specifically if you're running for president. So they knew Trump's flaws and went with him anyway. That was kind of her, I'm paraphrasing, but that was her sentiment. Well, Kristen Fleming from the New York Post said Hillary Clinton just can't stop blaming everyone else for her failures. Hillary Clinton's been playing a very, very long session of Monday morning quarterback, almost focusing on the same game, the 2016 presidential election. You'd think it'd get boring at this point, especially since our country has undergone seismic events that make 2016 feel like ancient history. So it's time to move on. But Clinton is as engaged as ever in the post-election analysis. She's prolific and innovative when it comes to mining blame and finding fresh excuses to explain her upset loss to Donald Trump. She sees scapegoats everywhere. Her latest target, women. Women were, she says, led astray by the old Clinton boogeyman, former FBI head James Comey, who reopened that last-minute investigation. We know that. She called the actions extremely careless. But once he did that to me, the voters who left me were women. They left me because they just couldn't take a risk on me because as a woman, I'm supposed to be perfect. They were willing to take a risk on Trump, who had a long list of, let's call them flaws, to illustrate his imperfections because he was a man and they could envision a man as president and commander-in-chief. So women hypnotized, according to Kristen Fleming, women hypnotized by the patriarchy were too dumb to see she was the truth in the way. It was lady-on-lady sexism. Clinton could fashion a large patchwork quilt with all the people she's pointed fingers at. She even wrote a book about it. Did you realize that? I guess I kind of forgot. It was called What Happened? Not What's Happening. Remember that TV show? What Happened? She started out by taking some ownership. She said, you can blame the data, blame the message, blame anything you want, but I was the candidate. It was my campaign. Those were my decisions. But old habits die hard. She then dedicated much of it to blaming Russian President Vladimir Putin and the media, particularly The Times, and Bernie Sanders, and then Trump. I always thought the media argument, because you see the Biden campaign and Biden administration complaining about the media so often, and you see now Hillary blame the media for 2016, and you think, man, a Democrat could never handle being a Republican for even a moment with the scrutiny the media puts on them. For instance, Donald Trump. So it's always amazing to me that they go after, basically bite the hand that feeds them. She even speculated at one point that Barack Obama had truly not gone to bat for her. I do wonder sometimes about what would have happened if President Obama had made a televised address to the nation in the fall of 2016, warning that our democracy was under attack. Maybe more Americans would have woken up to the threat. Never mind that plenty of people who voted for Obama twice pulled the lever for Trump, as the exit polling showed. The reality is, let me take a step back. What establishment politicians like Clinton don't get is that the electorate hears them loud and clear. It is the polls, the politicians who aren't listening to the voters. And that's exactly what this boiled down to. That's why I've talked so often about this, where the media is included in this. They didn't realize that Trump would have appeal. They thought he was a joke, that it was a circus. So they showed his rallies. They showed his speeches. And what they didn't realize was it resonated with the common man and woman. And I know I've quoted this before, but comedian Norm Macdonald, who passed away a couple years ago now, he had a good line on this. He said, people hated Hillary Clinton so much, they voted for the person they hated more. And I thought that was kind of, I don't accept that premise. But the idea is people did not like Hillary Clinton's message. And it's kind of similar to what Biden's doing right now, where she had to use celebrities to kind of get the message out, where Trump, as we're seeing now, could just pack in these rallies being the lone speaker, or, sometimes there's the governor or congressman or something might give an intro speech, but really the people there to see him without the fanfare of celebrities and musicians. And as Kristen Fleming writes, the reality is Clinton was cocky. And I think the whole party was. You've seen the videos, I'm sure, kind of rehashing all the people that said, Trump's not going to win. Hillary's going to win. And I talked about it yesterday, maybe the day before, with Merrick Garland. They didn't fight harder for the Supreme Court seat because they thought, well, Hillary's going to get this anyway, and she'll either pick Garland to continue or someone that she likes, some other liberal. And they just weren't as concerned as they would normally be to make that fight. A fight they probably could have won. Because at that point you had so many kind of wishy-washy Republicans who would say, well, we should have at least a hearing on it. And then, they'd vote for the Supreme Court. Somehow Democrats have done a very good job in the past, but maybe going back to Bork, where Republicans are very scared of that process. But I'll continue. She thought she had the vote in the bag and that calling people who felt left behind deplorables would be good for business. Yeah, she didn't realize the people that Trump were speaking to were the common man and woman, or as Trump called them, the forgotten man and woman, that she was calling deplorables, feeling that kind of elitist attitude when she already had that reputation as an elitist. She neglected Rust Belt states and never even went to Wisconsin, becoming the first Democrat presidential nominee to lose that state since 1984. She was also thoroughly unlikable, enlisting a bunch of coddled celebrities to sing her anthem fight song. It was campaign kryptonite. The fixation on her loss feels a bit like the orange man, as she says here, Trump, she is railing against. She claims to hold some sort of moral high ground, even though she spent years calling him an illegitimate president. She can blame women all she wants. We are not a monolith. We all have different viewpoints, different reasons for voting the way we do. The women I know who voted for Trump weren't avoiding placing a woman in the White House. They simply did not like her specifically. They wanted something different, someone different. If she wants to blame one woman, she's welcome to it. That lady is in her mirror, says Kristen Fleming. I thought that was a nice update from that story we brought up yesterday. I'm also going to talk about, I know we brought this up a lot. Fox has brought it up, New York Post, but the potential attempted terror attack by illegal immigrants. I've got just a quick update on that, and then we're going to dive into the nitty-gritty. We do have a lot of, not a lot on Israel today, but a little bit here, and we're going to talk about obviously the big story of the day, the hush money trial. And I don't know. I'd love to hear your opinion on the De Niro escapades. I know everybody else is talking about it. If I'm being honest, I just found it awkward. I found it. Well, I saw it as a desperation grasp from the Biden administration for even having the press conference, or I should say Biden campaign, that they've gone to that level of fear, that they found that necessary. And again, tying into what we just said about Hillary, are celebrities the best way to get your message out? Maybe the Democrats believe it works, and it could very well. I think there's something to be said when Trump can pack in 100,000 people in New Jersey and the huge crowds he packed in Bronx without that celebrity endorsement, without the musicians playing their current hits. So we're going to talk about that. Already running late because I know we're going to have fun this morning. I know we've got a lot to talk about. So feel free to weigh in anytime. Thank you for the waves coming in already. I know it's early. It is 6:14 here on your Wednesday. We'll be right back, frankly speaking, on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Big Fox. A couple comments from viewers. Since the Democrats control the media, Trump's got to get the boots on the ground to get his message out. And that goes back to what I've said. They no longer want to give him a platform. They don't want to show his rallies because it makes them concerned that he'll again resonate with the people. That's why they're trying to keep him tied up in court so he can't get his message out. The real threats to democracy are canceling a presidential candidate from ballots, bringing a presidential candidate to trial, and not saying what the actual crime is. And yes, we're going to have updates on that as well. What a mess. I mean, what's his first name? Quaid, the actor Quaid. Just to tie into what you said, I wasn't going to jump ahead this early, but Dennis Quaid. He actually says that it was the weaponization of the justice system that decided him to push for, and then he called Trump a name. He's not a big fan of Trump, but he doesn't like the weaponization of the justice system even more, to Congressman Sempolinski, former Congressman Sempolinski's point that some people may not like Trump, but they really hate the deep state. People might call him a blank, but he's my blank. I can't say any of it. Sorry. And again, he's out promoting his Reagan movie. I think I'm going to vote for him in the next election, he told Piers Morgan. It just makes sense. I was ready not to vote for Trump until what I saw is more than politics. I see a weaponization of our justice system and a challenge to our Constitution. Trump is the most investigated person probably in the history of the world, and they haven't been able to really get him on anything. But as president, the only thing I liked about Trump was everything he did. What he did with Korea, with Rocket Baby, the way he defeated ISIS in 3 weeks. You know, people don't even remember it happened so fast. How he stood up for us overseas, the way he responded to China. He stands up to people, and that's what makes him a leader, rather than what I kind of compare it to was what going on with the Jimmy Carter administration, where we were trying to be everybody's friend and pal. Doesn't that, I know he's being tactful here, but couldn't you say that about the Biden administration when we had the breaking story yesterday that he's telling allies not to criticize Iran for growing their nuclear capabilities? Always trying to be friends, always try to be buddies and pals with people that are always going to hate us, that call us the great Satan. It's a recipe for disaster. And there's some evil people and bad actors in the world. And so, you know, people might call Trump a blank, but he's my blank. I'll tell you one thing about him is that I really feel like he is working for the American people. That's what he's all about. And I do believe that to be true and sincere. As for his opinion on Biden, just since we're talking about Dennis Quaid, I don't feel like he's at the helm. I don't feel he's there. I feel that he says things to get votes, not that he truly believes them. And now I'm really going to get some blowback, but that's the way I feel. Yes, he will. I mean, that's the kind of thing loses you your job in Hollywood because it's so controlled by the left. But it is a good point, not being at the helm, that he is changing, for instance, his policies on Israel because he wants to cater to that growing anti-Israel part of the Democrat Party and their votes. So I thought those were all really good points by actor Dennis Quaid. But I want to give you this update just quickly before we go to break. By refusing repeated chances to answer simple questions about that May 3rd incident at Quantico Marine Corps Base, the Biden administration has essentially confirmed one of America's worst and most politically consequential nightmares related to the ongoing border crisis. 2 illegal immigrants just attempted a terror attack on U.S. soil. We've talked about this extensively. I don't have to go into the details of what happened that day, even though it's not being reported. The only place being reported that I've seen, Fox News and the New York Post. Now, what happened after they were apprehended with that quick-thinking military action? We don't know. The government refuses to say if either of these men were on a terror watch list, if they made any confessions in custody, or even if they were being deported. In fact, it wasn't even going to be reported to the American people. We would have never known about it if it weren't for that local reporter. Since then, the White House and ICE have had every opportunity to deny what seems obvious, but have not done so. Consider that, and this was I thought was a really good point why I bring it up. Consider that since the 9/11 attacks, federal authorities and the American people have enjoyed a kind of public compact that now stands broken. It is that the government almost always clarifies to the American public whether its top counterterrorism professionals regard initially ambiguous attacks as motivated by international or domestic terrorism, and often give a thumbs up or thumbs down on whether the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force was investigating. But the Biden administration will not engage in this one rare case, a startling break with post-9/11 tradition. But this goes back into what Dennis Quaid said, which is Biden making decisions for votes. He doesn't want people to realize, even more so because it's already number one by voters polled, immigration, how bad it is. We know it's bad, but we've talked time and time again about the real fear, the real threat of terrorists crossing that border. And again, this piece is from, who did I say it was from? Todd Bensman. He said, I believe Biden's people refuse to acknowledge the first ever border crossing terror attack as an attempt to serve political aims at the expense of public safety. They know that acknowledging a terror attack from the border crisis would further damage a Biden re-election campaign that is already suffering dearly from it. Already a dozen congressmen have sent a letter demanding answers about this attack. Consider that if law enforcement knows what terrorists have tried, it knows what to protect against. By stonewalling the nation for political gain, Biden is putting Americans in jeopardy. Tie that in with this next piece and talk about perfect piggyback scenario. The Biden administration is now scrambling after at least 6 men on a terror watch list were let into the U.S. over the last 2 years. The Biden administration is scrambling to close an intelligence sharing gap after at least 6 people on the terror watch list were let into the U.S. over the last 2 years. Under current rules, this goes to show you about bureaucracy. Under current rules, immigration judges and asylum officers who interview migrants to see if they qualify for entry into the U.S. are barred from accessing certain classified information held by the Department of Homeland Security, which would help them make better decisions about whether migrants are terrorists or national security threats. DHS Secretary Mayorkas now plans to increase automatic access to that information for judges and asylum officers, rolling back an order which stood since 2004, barring them from it except in certain exceptional circumstances, as first reported by NBC. So you tie that in with what looks like, I think to the naked eye, looks to us all like it was an attempt at a terror attack or a run-through to see how they could potentially be successful with a terrorist attack on American soil. But they're not giving us information. Now you tie into that at least 6 men. This is what they know of. We talk about all those gotaways to get across the border we know nothing about. But at least 6 men on the terror watch list were let into the U.S. over the last 2 years. And you wonder why the American people continue to put immigration and the open porous border as number 1 on their list of concerns. Wow, the waves are coming in. Thank you. We are hitting the ground running this morning. I got to take another short break. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, the White House has signaled that the Rafah strike doesn't cross their red line, though calling it heartbreaking, tragic, and horrific. John Kirby said, as a result of this strike on Sunday, I have no policy changes to speak of. It just happened. The Israelis are going to investigate it. We're going to be taking great interest in what they find in this investigation, and we'll see where it goes from there. The media are not happy, starting to kind of signal to Biden, you better change your positions if you want that vote from the anti-Israel left. U.S. made, this is coming from CNN, U.S.-made munitions used in deadly strike on Rafah tent camp is what CNN analysis shows. Munitions made in the United States were used in the deadly Israeli strike on a displacement camp in Rafah on Sunday. So this is just to get that message out there to Biden. You better start changing your tune on Israel. But John Kirby, White House spokesman John Kirby, defended Israel amid the international outrage, saying, we have conducted airstrikes in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, where tragically we caused civilian casualties. We owned up to it, we investigated it, and we tried to learn from it to make changes. We atoned for it, we learned from it, and we put in place procedures to try to prevent that from happening again. And that's what our expectations would be in this case. Hamas itself put out a statement celebrating the martyrdom of 2 of its fighters. So I don't know how anybody could dispute that they weren't trying to go after Hamas in a targeted, precise way in this regard. And he goes into some of the specifics of the munition, but saying that if this is true, what they used, it was an effort to be discreet, targeted, and precise. Now, obviously, this had tragic results, and obviously that needs to be investigated. And we need to know why, even using small diameter, precision-guided munitions, this was able to happen. But we'll have to let the Israelis get to the bottom of that. And then I thought this was an important point from John Kirby, saying maybe some people have forgotten what happened on the 7th of October, but we haven't. 1,200 innocent Israelis slaughtered, mutilated, tortured. And they're living right next to that kind of threat. Still a viable threat in Rafah. Yes, and I know I say this a lot, probably to the point where it sounds like a broken record. But while you see celebrities and college students and Democrat politicians calling for an immediate ceasefire, we've got to remember there was a ceasefire on October the 6th. And I don't think that's a message that can be stressed enough. So I'm glad that there are some continuing to bring that up. Because as we've mentioned numerous times, you don't put out 80% of a fire. You put all of it out. And that's why Mark Toth and Jonathan Sweet at the New York Post, I thought, put this perfectly. Because you've got to remember, this is sadly what Hamas wanted. That's why they keep civilians around their leaders and around their soldiers. Hamas is getting just what it wanted. Savagely, Martyrs Inc. is open for business in Rafah, exactly as intended by Hamas and its Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, sponsored in Tehran, and overlords in Moscow. The IDF Sunday attack, which killed 45 civilians, underscored just how drenched in innocent blood the road to Rafah has become at the hands of Hamas. The images were horrifying. Hamas would not want it any other way. In its demented world, Palestinian men, women, and children are simply a means to an end. As a matter of fact, Ismail Haniyeh, the political chief of Hamas, said as much last October. Safely tucked away in a luxury hotel 1,100 miles away from Rafah in Qatar, Haniyeh, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right, perversely reveled in the loss of Palestinians, or reveled in the loss of Palestinian civilians as Israel began to strike back against Hamas, saying, "We need this blood of the women, children, and elderly so that it will ignite within us the spirit of revolution." Palestinian civilians in the eyes of Hamas are their first line of defense. Geneva Conventions be damned. Martyrs Inc. is a mass-produced enterprise, and grotesquely, the younger the fallen, the better. None of this is new, and that's why I get so frustrated. You hear me get frustrated when media literally quote Hamas propaganda outlets to talk about the number of casualties. Hamas has used Gazans as a human shield since 2007. It does so to enable the firing of rockets into Israel, often sitting their weapons near schools, hospitals, and mosques. Also locating military or secure-related infrastructure, such as headquarters, bases, armories, access routes, etc., within the proximity of civilian areas. Far from protecting citizens, as evidenced on October 7th, they have made non-combatants their targets of choice, and their names that they call out specifically are Deif and Sinwar. Terrorize, kidnap, and kill Israeli civilians, and then flee back to Gaza and hide behind Palestinian men, women, and children to ensure mass casualties and garner international condemnation of Israel. We are living in a perverse, dystopian reality. Hamas is being rewarded for weaponizing civilians, and Israel condemned for taking steps to ensure that Deif and Sinwar are never again able to target Israeli civilians. Since October 7th, Spain, Ireland, and Norway have declared they would recognize a Palestinian state. Days ago, the UN General Assembly voted to bestow upon Palestine additional rights and privileges, while university campuses across the U.S. have been besieged by organized anti-Israel protests. Equally disturbing, President Biden appears poised to reward Hamas for using Palestinian and Israeli civilians as human shields. National security has taken a back seat to November politics and Biden's electoral pressures in Michigan, which we're going to talk about in just a second. According to reports, the Biden administration this is the hoped-for plan. Israeli hostages would be released, Saudi Arabia would recognize Israel, and Hamas essentially would be allowed to survive, but perhaps not technically in charge of post-war Gaza. It is a fantasy land way of thinking. Iran and Hamas are simply playing the Biden administration, playing them for fools. Biden led badly astray, getting tongue twisted this morning, by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, still naively believes he can cut a comprehensive deal with Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. This is a dangerous and deadly game for Biden to be playing just to win a presidential election. Yes, we talked about it yesterday, telling our allies, do not criticize Iran for building up their nuclear cachet. Plus, Biden is said to be offering Iran and Hamas Benjamin Netanyahu's head through back-channel negotiations led by Brett McGurk if the mullahs agree to an overall peace deal. Translation, Hamas's policies of weaponizing Palestinian civilians worked for Biden's White House. Deif and Sinwar, as a result, have every incentive to continue using Palestinian human shields. Moscow was no doubt pleased as well. Biden is cutting the legs off a U.S. ally and rewarding Russia's allies in the Mideast. It's madness and could condemn future generations of Palestinians and Israelis alike to more of the same under the thumb of Hamas's Martyrs, Inc. I thought that was really a powerful message, one the media will not tell you about, that, again, they blame Israel for every step of this, ignoring Hamas's role, which is all of it. This could be over today if it weren't for Hamas on October 7th and obviously building back up using Palestinians as human shields, et cetera, et cetera. I do have to say this before we go to break because I'm running late again. Waves coming in. Thank you. Nikki Haley, did you see what she did? So we talked about her visit to Israel yesterday, and I thought she said some very nice things, some very powerful things. Yesterday, I think the media is reporting on this, not all outlets, but the media is reporting this as kind of a disgusting move by her. I love this. She autographed a high explosive projectile that will be used, saying, "Finish them. America loves Israel always." I good. I think that's great. I know the media is being critical of her over that. "Finish them. America loves Israel always," written on that munition. Trying to, and remember, this was a day after the attack in Rafah, so the media is trying to confuse you on that, but keep that in mind. We're going to talk a couple little things about how this is trickling, obviously, onto the college campuses. Not even trickling, how it is on college campuses, what it means here in the United States. All that and much more. Running just a little bit late. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks for all the waves, and we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking after this. And we are back. I am running late this morning, so we got to take a break here real quick. But tying back in with Biden making decisions regarding the vote, Dennis Quaid saying it, the actor, many others, obviously, but I had mentioned him earlier. And what scares us about his policy decisions in Israel is that he's crafting it to appease the anti-Israel section of his party, like in Michigan, where they've had so many uncommitted protest votes. Did you now see that the top Democrat official in a key battleground county in Michigan will not endorse or back Biden? Macomb County? Probably Macomb, right? County Executive Mark Hackel told the Detroit News that he does not plan to vote in the presidential election because he dislikes Biden and Trump. "I don't have any interest in voting for president. I feel disappointed by that. I dislike both candidates, and all they do is talk negative about each other instead of talking about themselves and their ideas. I won't work for him. I'll let the people of Macomb make their own choice. I'm not voting for anyone just because a political party tells me I have to." Now, a Democrat consultant, Adolph Mongo, said that Hackel's decision hurts Biden, and Democrats will have to put a lot more resources into that county. Macomb, isn't it? I don't know. Tying that in just quickly, I think they might have started to realize the errors in their ways, these college campuses, as they undoubtedly have less people applying, losing some of the oomph that a degree from a Harvard or one of the Ivies had. Actually now, in my opinion, coming with a stigma, and it'll be interesting to see if that's ever reported on, what Columbia graduates, for instance, when they go to hand in their resumes at some of these major corporations, major businesses, hedge funds, things like that, if they are excluded from the race, because who wants to go through and look and see if that person was one of the anti-Semitic, anti-Israel protesters? Well, Harvard University says it will no longer weigh in on outside public matters. It runs the risk of alienating some. They said they will stay silent, this is Harvard, on public matters that do not directly concern its core function. Leaders at the prestigious school who recommended the new policy said that Harvard runs the risk of appearing to care more about some places and events than others. Oh, I didn't even think about this. Talk about the left kind of turning on the left, or maybe the woke turning on the woke. Because, okay, they're focused on anti-Israel sentiment, but what about other places where they may deem the situation troubling or problematic? Oh, that's interesting. Why do you care so much about this issue and not about this issue? That's why I thought it was funny where they were saying that not comedians. What's the word I'm looking for? Celebrities, but some of the specific people they called out, they were saying they haven't spoke out about this enough. Kind of the Instagram people, the Taylor Swifts, so celebrities, but all across the board. Social media is the one I'm trying to think of specifically, saying that you're not saying enough. But the problem is, if you say enough about an issue, then they turn on you for saying, wow, you're talking a lot about that. But don't you realize there's also suffering here, or there's suffering there? So you really are danged if you do, danged if you don't. Leaders said, and because few, if any, world events can be entirely isolated from conflicting viewpoints, issuing official empathy statements runs the risk of alienating some members of the community by expressing implicit solidarity with others. So maybe in this instance, they're not necessarily speaking out to the fact that being pro-Hamas, like these protesters were, alienated Jewish students. That never seemed to be a concern. Not just alienated, intimidated, violence, etc. That never really seemed to bother the administrators. As a matter of fact, the only real problem they had were when police were called. That's when it went too far, not the anti-Semitic language and like that. But what they're saying here is kind of laying the groundwork for, well, we're focused there, but there could be other issues in the future where we could alienate some on the left for not being far enough to the left. And by the way, the word I was looking for was influencers. Social media influencers. Anyway, the report noted that the university and its leaders should not issue official statements about public matters that do not directly affect the university's core function, which I think their core function is what, indoctrination? I'm not sure if they gave a definition of their core function. Harvard said Tuesday the school accepted the working group's recommendations. The process of translating these principles into concrete practice will, of course, require time and experience, and we look forward to the work ahead, said interim president Alan Garber. As part of the new initiative, Harvard will no longer issue official statements concerning wars, like it had following the Russian invasion of Ukraine and for Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel. And that could be the problem, because they called out Hamas's attack on Israel, but when you saw what some of those protesters were saying, I'm not sure if that was the right position to take, unfortunately, for the universities. That's how bad those protests devolved. If you recall, at the time, then President Claudine Gay had condemned the barbaric atrocities perpetrated by Hamas, but faced immense scrutiny for not criticizing 30 Harvard student groups that published a letter holding Israel entirely responsible for the Hamas terror attacks. So this may sound like it's coming from a good place. We don't want to run the risk of alienating some. What that means is, this again is the woke turning on the woke. It wasn't that maybe they shouldn't have spoke out about the war in Gaza, because it alienated some students as they took the pro-Hamas side. Some of the students were Jewish. So no, it's not that. It's actually because they had the audacity to say Hamas was bad for October 7th, perpetrated atrocities. That was where the real rub came from. Think about that, how wild and scary college campuses have become. We've got to take another short break. We're getting away from that topic. We've got a lot of other topics to cover this morning. We are going to talk about the trial coming up in the next hour during our Student Senior Services Fund section of the program. We're going to be talking to Elisa and Robert from Colonial Days and Painted Post, so don't miss that. But right now, let's take that short break. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Receiving a comment during break, and I was just I was trying to put together my thoughts on it. Do you know anything about the Senate bill called the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act? I heard the bill's intention was to prop up the falling profits of the legacy media. by forcing the tech giants of the internet to pay a portion of their advertising revenue to the legacy media conglomerates. I've always wondered how the legacy media benefits from being in bed with the Democrats. This may be one way they will benefit. Well, there's a lot to dissect there, and I obviously don't know all the specifics of it, but I know there was a lot of criticism because it's basically government-sanctioned protection of, originally the way I heard it, and I kind of stopped paying attention to it after it first broke, but it was to preserve and protect, if you will, newspapers, the kind of the dying newspaper industry. I think it grew from there. One of the issues that I've also, so basically just give you a little background on it. If I'm writing for the local newspaper and my story gets picked up and, Facebook uses it, Facebook starts sharing it, they have to pay a certain portion to me. So it's kind of like government sanctioned or mandatory payment by the big tech companies to keep these businesses alive. There's more to it, though, and I guess I'd have to do some more research on it because it's kind of tough to give you the exact info because everything I received at the time is from a media perspective, obviously because I'm in the media, not like the media you're talking about, obviously. But so it came from kind of trade outlets and trade publications. So that's when I started to realize that I wasn't getting the true story and did not hear where it went. It kind of dropped off my radar if I'm being, I'm honest with you. I'm not one of these people that try to tell you that I know something I don't. It dropped off my radar once I started seeing that it was basically social media companies paying these various news outlets. So yes, I do think, to your point though, I think there's more than just that, why the legacy media benefits from being in bed with Democrats. I think, and I've said this before, I don't think it's always about money. I think it's about the quote unquote glamour. I think it's about the, in their mind, it's about being on the right side. And obviously that doesn't mean the right side, it means the left. And it's getting invited to these cocktail parties. And they know, because the media is so controlled by the left, that if they do steer away from that, they're out of a job. They're out of popularity. They're a social pariah. So I think there's a lot to that too. It's a one hand washes another sort of scenario. And because at the end of the day, they believe in the core beliefs of what the Democrats believe. And that's why they work together. By the way, this is an update before we go to break. Remember how we said that Biden was going to have issues getting on the Ohio ballot because they weren't following the rules because of when the convention was? Well, they may have found a workaround. The Democrat National Committee is planning to virtually nominate President Biden ahead of the party's convention after the Ohio State Legislature deadlocked on a fix last week to get the president on the ballot. DNC Chair Jamie Harrison announced Democrats would be holding a virtual roll call to ensure Biden gets on the ballot in all 50 states. An announcement made on the same day Ohio state lawmakers returned to the Capitol for a special session to solve Biden's ballot access issue. Joe Biden will be on the ballot in Ohio and all 50 states, and Ohio Republicans agree. But when the time has come for action, they have failed to act every time, so Democrats will land this plane on their own, Harris said in a statement. Through a virtual roll call, we will ensure that Republicans can't chip away at our democracy through incompetence or partisan tricks, and that Ohioans can exercise their right to vote for the presidential candidate of their choice. How dare the Democrat Party try to blame this on Republicans when there was a set of rules that they had to follow, number one. Number two, the hypocrisy when you have a party that actively tried to keep Trump's name off of primary ballots, meaning his party's ballots. Democrats tried doing that. So to call this a threat to democracy, wasn't that move a threat to democracy? And we have so many examples of that where it's a, never mind, do as I say, not as I do. It's a, as we are a threat to democracy, we are going to project that onto you and blame you as being a threat to democracy. But we've got to take another break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. This is why so many people have been outspoken about this, even some who maybe are predisposed to disliking Trump, saying, what are we really, what crime is going on here? Well, how are we even allowed to do this? Going back to the The Ohio Democrats saying about threats to democracy. How is this not a threat to democracy? But we're going to go in depth on that discussion in the next hour. But every step of the way, and I don't know how else you could look at it, every step of the way, it seems like the fix has been in against Donald Trump. If nothing else, just to get the jury confused. And you've got to remember, this is a New York jury. So I think, and that's why, how do I say this cautiously? Oh, did the theme song run late? Thank you for the heads up. I'm not sure why the theme song just changes sometimes. I appreciate that, though. Thank you for the heads up on that. But what I was saying is a viewer said, what do you think about the New York judge allowing the jury to deliberate a supposed federal violation, for the judge not to allow a professional witness to discuss what the laws are that pertain to what the prosecution has tried to prove, also to not allow the defense to discuss the laws pertaining to the accusations made? Yeah, every step of the way, the fix has been in against the former president. And that's why there's many people outraged. That's why they see it as a weaponization of the judicial system, like we heard from actor Dennis Quaid, who I'm sure his career will suffer greatly because of that, but seeing it for what it is. And I think it's a New York jury. So you have this kind of attempt to confuse them, and they're going to be most likely predisposed to not liking Trump either. One thing I will say to kind of prepare you and be cautious when I say this, I think some even Republicans are saying don't expect this to go that well, because the fix has been in from the beginning. There's been so many things used against and weaponized against the president, making this trial unfair. So yes, they'll eventually relitigate this. They'll take it back to court, but that'll be after the election. So the damage, in I think the Democrats' mind, and specifically the judge's mind, the damage will already have been done. So that's just a matter of fact. Reading as much as I do to prepare for this show, I've said there's a lot of people that are very cautious on the Republican side, not because they don't believe this should be thrown out immediately. They do. But they're looking at the reality of what has been put forth and the fix being in from day one. But we are out of time in this hour. We are going to talk about that extensively in the next hour. A couple other things to get to. I also mentioned that Elise and Robert from Colonial Days are going to be joining us a little bit later on, so stay with us. Hour number 1 in the books. Get ready for hour number 2 here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. We're going to be talking about the trial. Just a couple of quick things I want to get to kind of reset the scene. And thank you for all the waves early this morning. That's a good amount of waves to start hour number 2. First of all, probably last month, we talked about in New York State the need, the want, the real focus of voters' concerns being the elimination of single slices of cheese, wrapped single slices of cheese. Of course, not something the voters were really concerned about, but something that Albany was concerned about. We have a new one, folks, this morning. And I'm actually going to say I'm surprised this hasn't been already accomplished. New York State proposes expanded ban on foam coolers. The popular foam coolers that people use often during the summer months. Lawmakers say the reason for the push is to curb the environmental impact caused by these non-biodegradable products. The proposed legislation, which has received overwhelming support in both the Assembly and the Senate, looks to prohibit the sale and distribution of foam containers used for cold storage. Ooh, the sale. So you can open up an illegal pot shop. You better not be caught selling foam containers out of such pot shop. If approved by Governor Hochul, lawmakers say the ban would be an important step towards reducing plastic pollution and protecting the state's waterways. So I know it's nice every once in a while, Albany really focused on your concerns. Not public safety, we'll worry about that another day. Not immigration, not taxes, not horrible business climate. That's for future dates. Right now we've got to focus on what's number 1, what's the most important, and that is the ban of foam coolers. Okay, back to Biden and his campaign. 2 quick things, and then we're going to get to Trump. Just to show you, we predicted it. We've talked about it. I'm not even going to say predicted it. We talked about it a lot, that Biden is going to run on basically 2 things. One, that Trump is a threat to democracy. We heard that from Robert De Niro, who I am going to mention in a little bit, but we're not going to go too much in depth with him. But threat to democracy, and abortion. Well, Joe Biden enlists January 6th police officer to campaign in swing states. Just to show you that that's kind of telling you a little bit of what is to come. Also, guess what you would say is probably bad news for Joe Biden. London Roberts, who is the mother of Hunter Biden's child, the child that the Biden administration or the Biden family would not acknowledge, Joe Biden specifically would not, and Dr. Jill would not acknowledge that grandchild. I think eventually having to because of some court decision. Well, she is going to release a tell-all book on her roller coaster fling, and it's coming out during the Democratic National Convention week. London Roberts, a former, we'll say, dancer and mother of Hunter Biden's daughter, born out of wedlock, Navy Joan, is releasing a tell-all roller coaster memoir in August during the week of the Democratic National Convention. Robert will be releasing her memoir called Out of the Shadows, My Life Inside the Wild World of Hunter Biden on October 20th, which details her tumultuous relationship with Biden. The memoir's release I already said with the convention. All right. Anyway, I'm not going to tell you some of the stuff that's said in there, but if that's something that interests you, that'll be coming out in August. So thank you for the waves, everybody. But tying that in and kind of the wild antics recently of the Obama administration, I've done that twice now, the Biden administration, the kind of reek of desperation. I know people are going to comment and say, well, it kind of is like the Obama administration with the people behind the scenes. I know, pulling the strings for Biden. It was completely a Freudian slip. I've had a couple of tongue-twisting incidents this morning. But what's interesting about this is the signal of desperation from the Biden campaign with kind of the antics, calling for the debates, the incumbent president calling for the debates against Trump, and then, of course, making all those kind of outlandish rules. You have yesterday's press conference during the last day, not the last day of trial, but the last day before deliberation. Well, ever since Trump launched his 2016 campaign, Democrats have argued that he is too weird in too many ways to be president, said Michael Goodwin. They let their Hollywood wing paint him as a crazy orange man, and the Washington wing stoke fear about his threats to democracy and this smashing of political norms. Never mind the political norms that are being smashed by, ignoring the Supreme Court and still giving out school loans, paying off school debt. Never mind trying to keep people off ballot, the weaponization of the judicial system. The list goes on and on. These two wings merged, though, yesterday with the very bizarre appearance of Robert De Niro. Once a great actor, says Michael Goodwin, De Niro has become an unhinged Trump hater, and his denunciation of the former president, alternatively as a clown and a tyrant, amounted to little more than a pipsqueaking. I thought it was, at bare bones, just extremely, extremely awkward. I know he's been giving a lot of interviews, kind of being a surrogate for Biden, talking about how Trump's a threat to democracy, how bad Trump is. Now, here's the problem. De Niro didn't show up on his own accord outside the Lower Manhattan courthouse where Trump is on trial. He was sent by Joe Biden's campaign team as its representative. The juvenile speech he read presumably was written by, or at least approved by, the White House. And they say Trump is weird. When a has-been actor is your top surrogate, somebody in the White House is panicking. In fact, there is nothing normal about Joe Biden or his misbegotten presidency, despite what he and the media would have you believe. Finally, the pressure of facts is demolishing the manufactured idea of character and competence. The De Niro performance came on the same day that Politico chronicled a freak-out among party leaders who believe Biden is headed for defeat. And we mentioned that yesterday on the program. And a lot of really interesting, some anonymous sources, some named, saying that what no one wants to say in the Democrat Party, which is that Biden is not doing well. Not as just with his health and mental acuity, but also with the campaign. Anxiety has morphed into palatable trepidation, according to more than a dozen party leaders and operatives, and the gap between what Democrats will say on TV or in print and what they'll text their friends has only grown as worries have surged about Biden's prospects. So this is what you decide to turn things around. You get De Niro out there, and it's been a disaster for 3 years. And 3.5 years. And like Michael Goodman says, and now it took the people, the insiders, to just recognize. Chief among their ideas was to prosecute or persecute, however you want to look at it, Trump, to keep him off the campaign trail and potentially put him in prison. Superficially, it has succeeded as he has been stuck in the Manhattan courtroom most days and subject to a nonstop barrage of indictments and critical press coverage. The only hitch is that the legal jihad has backfired politically. Yes, it was that example where people started to say, okay, this is too far. You're taking this too far in your attempt to bring down Trump. What is the crime that is being accused here? Why is Trump not getting a fair trial and a witness to kind of wade through the laws for the jury? Never mind the obviously conflict of interests with the judge. But it has made Trump more popular as the 4 criminal cases are so deeply flawed that it's obvious they would not exist except for partisanship. And even many Democrats have said that, saying this is done. Once Trump's is over, it's just because of Trump. Fareed Zakaria, for heaven's sakes, from CNN, said this would not be a case if the defendant's name was not Donald J. Trump. But that's not just abnormal. It's unprecedented in American history. Yet bad ideas are hard to kill, and the artifice that Biden is normal and Trump is abnormal lives on. The New York Times, obviously a mouthpiece for the Democratic Party, actually adopted that formula in a comparison of the candidates on Memorial Day. Both talked about the cost of freedom, but Trump added a second statement full of vitriol aimed at the judges presiding over his cases. The Times called the second statement a reminder of the stark differences between the men and added that Mr. Trump showed that he would not be held to the norms of behavior that guide the nation's leaders on a somber national holiday. Fair enough, if holiday statements are your only measure. But here are a few things the great lady leaves out. The Wall Street Journal reports the Biden White House is pressuring European allies, I mentioned this yesterday on the program, to back off plans to rebuke Iran for advances in its nuclear program. Disastrous. I mean, the negative consequences of that decision, again, from an administration that always wants to be friends and pals with Iran. Some of those allies believe the administration doesn't want to do anything to cause trouble with Iran before the U.S. election. Is that a norm of behavior in the New York Times? But the New York Times admitted, and we brought it to you last week, that they don't have to be fair. They don't like Trump that much. They feel that he's that big of a threat to democracy. And have you noticed how many people just say that now, nonchalantly on the news, as if it is an established fact that Trump is a threat to democracy? So to delay confronting Iran just to give a false impression of peace until the election. That sounds more like election fraud than anything Trump has done. Yes, I think of the precedent this case is going to set if this was a sort of election fraud because he tried not to put, if this was alleged, tried not to put bad information out about himself. I mean, it's nonsensical. But I don't want to go through all of Michael Goodwin's piece here because it does run a little long. But it says, over the weekend, the Post reported that Biden visited the home of Hallie Biden, the widow of his son, Beau, and later Hunter's lover. She is scheduled to testify to Hunter's illegal gun purchase trial, which begins next week. So there's nothing even close to a normal visit about this. If Trump did that, the Times would accuse him of witness tampering. When Biden does it, crickets. The point is clear. Normal is whatever Biden does, and abnormal is whatever Trump does. Everything else is detail. I thought that was kind of an interesting way of doing that. Wow, we got a lot of comments coming in. Let me take a break. We'll read those comments. Coming up right around 7:20, we're going to talk with Elisa and Robert from Colonial Days and Painted Post. So stay with us. This is, frankly speaking, we're just getting warmed up. Hour number 2. And we are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Wow, a lot of comments coming in. They reek of corruption and the whole world knows the truth, meaning the Biden administration. Thank you very much. Trump trial. If the crime does not fit, you must acquit. Very true. Here's another comment. With regards to foam coolers, doesn't the government in Albany realize New York is bordered by various other states where after a short drive, citizens can purchase all of these illegal items? This is similar to the policy banning harmful emissions. Does the government, again in Albany, think the harmful emissions from neighboring states will stop at the border? This is so virtue signaling where it really is just, look, we're trying to do more and more to show you how much we care about the environment more than others, more than California perhaps. It's so cliche. That's why I said I'm surprised nothing had been done already about it. And here's another comment. My question is, why aren't the leaders of the Republican Party coming out against the court sham happening to Trump? Their silence is deafening. I'm going to disagree with you slightly on this, and it's not necessarily a disagreement. It's just my perspective on it that's maybe perhaps a little bit different than yours. I do believe Republicans are speaking out on this. But going back to a conversation we've been having since the beginning of this program, essentially, about the media isn't going to interview the person that wants to talk, the Republican that wants to talk about the sham trial. They don't want to interview the person that highlights how the fix is in against Trump. So they're not going to do the interviews. They're not going to do the coverage of the rallies. And remember, no one has rallies like Trump. So the politicians that are holding rallies are more like town halls or smaller events. So they're not going to cover that. And I can, as a congressman, senator, governor, I can write 1,000 press releases talking about what kind of sham this is, and the media just is not going to cover it. So I put the blame on that. I don't believe they're silent, and I have an example of that in just a second. I don't believe they're silent. I believe their voice is being stifled. And that's why I think when you do see, listen, they're sending letters all the time to the Biden administration, to elsewhere. It just does not get covered, and it gets ignored. So I don't, and I'm not saying I'm not saying all Republicans are perfect on this at all. I'm saying there are many, many, many Republicans that are speaking out on this and talking about this. You just may not be aware because you have no opportunity to see it or to hear it. That would be my argument to that. And here's an example. Representative Elise Stefanik filed a misconduct complaint on Tuesday against the judge overseeing Donald Trump's Manhattan trial, alleging that his selection to handle the former president's case and others involving his allies is not random at all. And she's been very outspoken about this as well. Suspicious that Judge Merchant is always getting these cases, isn't it? Again, the fix is in. The House Republican Conference chairwoman's complaint with the Inspector General of the New York State Unified Court System called for an investigation into Justice Juan Merchant to determine whether the required random selection process was in fact followed. The potential misconduct pertains to the repeated assignment of acting Justice Juan Merchant, a Democrat Party donor, to criminal cases related to President Donald J. Trump and his allies. Acting Justice Merchant currently presides over the criminal case against President Trump brought by Alvin Bragg. Acting Justice Merchant also presided over the criminal trial against the Trump Organization and will be presiding over the criminal trial of Steve Bannon, a senior advisor in President Trump's White House and a prominent advocate for President Trump. Noting that there were at least 24 sitting justices eligible to oversee the cases, but Merchant, an acting jurist, was selected for all three related to the presumptive 2024 GOP nominee. A little suspicious, a couple red flags there, right? If justices were indeed being randomly assigned in the criminal term, the probability of two specific criminal cases being assigned to the same justice is quite low, and the possibility of three specific criminal cases being assigned to the same justice is infinitesimally small. And yet we see acting Justice Merchant on all three cases. The Congresswoman also highlighted the judge's political donations, for which he was cleared of misconduct last July. He also his daughter working as a consultant. I don't know if she brought that up specifically. The judge's daughter, she is more involved in Democrat politics, though, through her work as head of the consulting firm Authentic Campaigns. One cannot help but suspect the random selection at work in the assignment of acting Justice Merchant, a Democrat Party donor, to these cases involving prominent Republicans is in fact not random at all, Stefanik said. Demanded an investigation into the anomaly and asked that anyone found to be involved in any sort of scheme to get Merchant on these three cases face discipline. There you go. Okay. I got to take a break because we've got our guest coming up. To this comment from Ken. Did you see the Biden ditch the press to make a visit to Hallie Biden, who he hasn't seen in years and who is reportedly going to testify against Trump just prior to the start of Hunter's gun trial? Can you imagine the backlash if Trump visited Cohen before the trial? Absolutely. We mentioned that yesterday, that exact point, not though I didn't specifically name Cohen, but this is another example of how completely rigged, if you will, to use the former president's term, this trial is against Trump. And how, again, the conversation we've been having all morning and really since the beginning of the show is how the media hides this information. Haley Biden made up some excuse why he visited her. Very reminiscent of it. What was the meeting where Bill Clinton was having that meeting with, who was it, in that airplane where they just talked about their grandkids? Same scenario. Oh, we were just talking about the anniversary that wasn't that day, the anniversary in a few days or a few weeks even of Beau Biden's passing, I believe it was. So, hasn't seen her in years. She's going to testify against Hunter, and he just happens to stop by and make a visit. Now, if that were, and let's not even say Cohen, if there was anybody involved in the Trump case and Trump went to visit them, what do you think the media would say? Can you imagine what the judge would say? But could you imagine the coverage of that? It would be nonstop and it would be unbearable. Another threat to democracy. Another comment from a viewer. Governor Hochul has shown her contempt for citizens' choices on who they want for president, which is right in line with the corruption in America. Hochul rules as a tyrant rules, all for her party's agenda, nothing for taxpayers. I would also add, if you are a Trump supporter and you're in New York, yeah, Susan Rice, thank you. I think it was Susan Rice. No, was it Susan Rice? Anyway, but remember, Hochul believes that if you are a New Yorker and you are a Trump supporter, you are nothing but a clown. So that gives you a little bit of her mindset. That's, again, I don't think an example of Hochul not always being always thinking she's a little bit smarter than she is in her messaging. Was it Susan Rice? I'm sorry. I'm trying to look it up. Airplane meeting. I better be careful how I search that because there's other airplane. Loretta Lynch. Is that who it was? I think it was Loretta Lynch. There was an accidental meeting at the airport. Yes, that's who it was. Attorney Governor Loretta Lynch. I didn't think it was Susan Rice. But thank you. I love when people try to help me out on this program. I need all the help I can get. All right, we're taking a short break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking with Elisa and Robert from Colonial Days Painted Post. You won't want to miss this. So we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and this is the Stu Benz Senior Services Fund section of our program. And this morning, we're talking to Elisa and Robert about Colonial Days. Welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
So this is big. Colonial Days, 60 years. Tell us about that.
60 years. So this is believe it or not, this is the actual 60th year since Mayor Fuller J. Allen made the first proclamation in Painted Post for Colonial Days.
It kind of is I want to say the beginning of summer, right? It's kind of become a staple of summer for Colonial Days.
It is. It's a kickoff of the summer.
Yeah. Now, what kind of events do you have planned this year? I know it's had some up and downs through the years, and you guys want to bring it back bigger and better.
Yeah,
so tell me about that.
Well, it took a time off. COVID really put a damper on things,
Sure.
right? So people sort of lost track over time. But bring it back. We brought it back 2 years ago. So this is actually going to be our third Colonial Days since COVID took over. So we have a great list of scheduled events. We have, once again, kicking off on the 6th with our Miss Colonial Days pageant.
We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Awesome. On June 7th and 8th, we have our crafts fair, which will be our local crafts vendors will be over at Village Square, right on the street of North Hamilton. So please come on out, take a look at them, look at the wares. That's going to be running on June 7th and 8th between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. on that Friday. And on that Saturday during the actual parade, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., it's also going to be there as well. So that's on the 7th and 8th. On June 7th, we have Blue Eyed Soul is going to be performing over in the Sit and Bull parking lot. And that concert is going to be from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. That is a free concert for the community. Come on down, take a look, watch the free concert. Blue Eyed Soul, an amazing band. We had them last year. They were amazing. We have the vendors are also there. There'll be food to purchase as well. So come on down. They are a good family-oriented band. So bring the kids down, rock on out. It's going to be an amazing time. And then on the 8th.
But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more. But wait, there's more. On June 8th is the actual Colonial Days Parade. So we have a good lineup, bands, school bands coming. We'll have those vendors, those craft vendors there. Come on out. It's going to be a great time.
Well, one thing I think this speaks to, and it was always like this at Colonial Days, and it's good to hear that it's such a focus, is it's about community and it's about family.
Absolutely.
And I think, sometimes you go to these fairs now, and they're not quite as community-minded anymore with the rides and like that. That's why I love that you've got craft fair, you've got local bands, you've got the parade. What should people know about the parade? Because I know that always used to be a pretty big deal to get there early.
Yeah, I mean, you could set up, come on down. We kick off with the firemen's firefighters parade. That's going to kick off at 10:30 in the morning, and then after that will be the regular parade. So I would say you can come down early. Probably start setting up around 9:30. Probably be a safe bet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Elisa, we're going to switch over to you, and then we're going to come back and wrap things up on Colonial Days. But let's talk about bringing back the pageant. How's it going so far?
It's going so well. This is really exciting. I was a part of the pageant years ago.
Yeah.
So Pilar Miller, she was one who kind of kicked it off, and she did it for years, and she did an amazing job. And when she left the area and kind of retired from it, she passed the baton to me, which was a huge honor. And then, as Robert said, after COVID, everything just kind of went away. So we're really excited to bring it back because it focuses on young girls and women who teaching them about the importance of being involved in the community, and it helps build esteem and confidence. So we're excited, and it's going really well.
Are people excited to have it back?
Yeah, we're getting a really good response.
It is interesting because obviously I grew up in Irwin, right down the road, by Painted Post. All this brings back such great memories. Seeing all the pageant entries and then seeing
It's
the parade.
nostalgic.
Yeah, it really is, and it's just a fun summer event. So can people still sign up?
They can. So we had a hard deadline of the 26th, but we've decided to extend it because we had the holiday and we are getting such a great response. So we're going to actually extend it till the end of the month, which is Thursday, I believe.
think so. Thursday,
yes, the 31st.
And
Or Friday.
Oh, Friday. I think it is Friday.
Yeah. Okay.
Friday. What do? Well, just wait. Go to the 31st. You don't have to know what day it is. Don't wait that long. Do it now. Sign up
do
now.
it now.
Yes. What do contestants need to know?
Okay, so we are accepting contestants from age 4 all the way up to 18. We're going to do 5 different age categories, and we're going to actually announce winners in each of those 5 categories. So that's exciting. As far as what they need to know, we're going to do a dress rehearsal on the Wednesday before. So they'll show up, and I'll have all that information once they register.
Okay.
The littles, all the way up to 15, all they're going to do the day of is pretty much walk the stage, and they may be asked a question or two.
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to be judged on like their poise and their confidence and their appearance, how well that they maybe speak or interact with the MC. And then the older girls, or the Miss category from age 16 to 18, they actually have to do a short essay and a private one-on-one interview that they'll do the night before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's a little bit more involved with them, but we expect more out of them. They're young women who are going to be representing our community for the rest of the year.
Right. And what kind of prizes are involved?
So they'll obviously get a title.
Yeah.
A crown, which I brought.
Oh, good. All
we
right.
have crowns, and how beautiful are these?
Oh, that's very nice.
I don't know if you can see.
Yeah.
A sash, and then prizes, including cash.
Oh,
up
wow.
to $500.
Wow. So it's not too late to sign up. It doesn't sound like there's really that much time invested into it for them.
It's not. It's the Wednesday before for a dress rehearsal. Then that Thursday is the pageant. They get Friday off. They can come and enjoy the festival and the music. And then back on Saturday, the queens that actually were crowned will be riding in the parade.
Oh, that must be a really amazing event for them to be able to ride in that parade and be cheered on by their fellow Painted Post residents. But it's not just for Painted Post residents, right?
It's not. So this year we also talked about this. We really wanted to open it up because, you know, we're bigger than just
Right.
Corning Painted Post, right? We are one community here, but we're all of,
Right.
you know, we're everything. So school-age children in the Corning Painted Post and surrounding areas is what we said. So
That's a great idea. I think it's always nice to expand and have more people get involved. So going back to Colonial Days in general, how's the planning itself going?
Great. Great. We have great committees. We are extraordinarily lucky to have Elisa with us. We were excited when we found out that she was going to be a part of this.
Yeah.
You know, planning's going great. You know, there was one other thing that I failed to mention regarding Colonial Days itself. You know, one of the things that we found that speaking to people, and especially the bands, where they never got to hear each other.
Right.
These bands never get to hear each other because when they're marching, all they do is hear themselves. They're not in the same place with the other bands.
Sure.
So we listen to what the school bands asked us. We're bringing everybody back to the Craig Park Pavilion after the parade is completed. Come on down to the Craig Park Pavilion, and all of the bands are going to be playing their music again for each other.
Oh, what a
And
great
it's
idea.
inside the pavilion. It's loud. It's great. We have all the grass for all the families. Come on down, have a great time, and we have our chicken barbecue going on at the same time.
Perfect
so you could
timing.
be
We thought of
listening.
everything.
You could be listening to the bands perform once again, and you can pick up an amazing, awesome, one of the largest chicken barbecues in the area.
And that's right at Craig Park, and each meal is just $12 and includes half a chicken, salt, potatoes, and baked beans. Also, a couple of quick things. I'm sure this takes a lot of volunteers, right? Can people still get involved and help?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. If you are interested in volunteering and helping out, you can email us at info.parks.arts@gmail.com.
And this just seems to be getting better and better each year. What should people know who maybe never attended a Colonial Days? That's a tough
Come
one.
in and enjoy yourself.
fun.
Yeah.
It's a family-oriented
You'll feel,
time.
yeah. You'll feel definitely a part of a community, and you'll feel that family sense.
Where can people find out more about Colonial Days, and specifically with you, Elisa, find out more about getting involved in the pageant?
So we have a Facebook page, Miss Colonial Days Pageant. You have all the information. We've
Yep.
got an email address. And then, Parks and Arts has a Facebook page
Yep.
as well.
You can catch us on our Facebook page. You can catch us on Facebook with Painted Post Parks and Arts, or there's also links on the Village of Painted Post Facebook page, which is Village of Painted Post.
Is it too late for people to sign up for the craft fair, or maybe as an organization get involved?
Yeah, absolutely.
Vendors.
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Yeah.
If you're a vendor and you want to be a part of this great experience, please reach out to us. You can go on to us on our Facebook page. There are QR codes that you can sign up, or you can, once again, you could email us at info.parks.arts@gmail.com.
So something going on every day from June 6th to the 8th is Colonial Days and Painted Post. Before we go, just to change up the topic a little bit, let's talk about the youth summer program while I have you
Oh,
here.
absolutely. So this is our first youth summer program over in the Village of Painted Post, over at the Craig Park Pavilion. We got a very generous donation from Corning Incorporated. So if you're the program's going to run from July 8th to August 2nd. The hours are going to be 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Monday through Thursday. There is an in-person at the Craig Park Pavilion, and that is going to be on, I believe, the
Oh, it's
9th.
June 9th. Yep, June 9th.
June 9th. Come on down between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. And self-register, register your kid. We'll have registration forms there and available. We're also going to get our registration forms up prior to that, right up on our Facebook page, either on the Village of Painted Post or on Painted Post Parks and Arts. Fill out the registration form, come on down in person, fill it out at Craig Park Pavilion. There's going to be weekly themes, arts and crafts, games, storytelling, music, and we'll be providing healthy snacks.
Well, I think we covered everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm so glad that Colonial Days is back, better than ever. Starts on June 6th with Miss Colonial Days pageant. Good luck.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Are you going to come out for it?
Yeah, of course. Is it going to be stressful for you, you think? Or do you think you got it all down?
No, I think it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to being back and
You know what? It's also going to be over at the Sit-in Bull parking lot. So
okay.
everything is not going to be in Hodgman Park this year. We've moved everything right up onto North Hamilton Street, so you can just walk right by and walk right on in. There'll be the cars driving by. So everything is the events, the concert, the crafts fair, the pageant, all right there in the Sit-in Bull parking lot, right on North Hamilton in the Village of Painted Post.
Well, perfect. Well, thanks so much for being my guest. Before
you.
we go, Lisa, you know people be mad at me if I don't ask. How's Sylvia?
she's doing so good, and she's going to be back July 10th through 20th.
Okay.
So we'll have to have her come in.
She'll
and
have
do
to
a
come
little
back on
update
the
for
show.
everybody.
All right. Well, thank you. And tell her I said hi. We all say hi.
will.
All right. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. And we are back, frankly speaking, here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. Thanks again to Elisa and Robert for joining us during the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. Colonial Day sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun this year. And it's not too late to sign up for that pageant if you are interested. Okay, moving along. De Niro's embarrassing spectacle. I don't want to focus too much on this, but Isaac Shore, I thought, had a really good piece about that this morning in the New York Post. And then we're going to tell you what Trump had to say if you haven't already seen what Trump had to say about it. But he said, while Trump has only himself to blame for many of the legal battles he finds himself embroiled in, voters can see Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's case for the petty, zombified husk that it is. Now, he prefaces it. Isaac Shore, perhaps maybe not the biggest Trump supporter, but we'll continue. That's why Trump continues to dominate the polls in spite of the salivating liberal press, who their ceaseless coverage of the trial in all of its unsavory glory. Well, that and Biden's failed presidency on myriad of issues, immigration, gender ideology, and Israel's righteous war against Hamas included, the commander-in-chief continues to appeal to the far left of his coalition, to the dismay of the median voter. Yeah, so you have a time when people are not liking the weaponization of the judicial system, and also at the same time saying, I don't want to vote for Trump. But look at the radicalness, the radicalization coming out of the Biden presidency. Continuing, is it really the judgment of the Biden campaign that the remedy to these challenges is to trot out an 80-year-old celebrity to aimlessly rant outside of Trump's trial in, by the way, a deep blue New York state? That goes to show you how worried they were after they saw those polls that showed with what I think Biden was only over Trump 9 percentage points in New York State. Continuing, De Niro's speech was perfectly representative of what this country is, why this country is primed to send Biden packing. Oh, here's a comment just caught my attention. By the way, newsflash, I wouldn't have voted for you. Let me try that again. By the way, newsflash, Hillary, I wouldn't have voted for you, perfect or otherwise. That goes back to our conversation earlier where Hillary suggested that's why she lost. Women voters left her because she was not perfect. Anyway, so it was very awkward, the Biden press conference with De Niro. It was overwrought. Donald Trump wants to destroy not only the city, but the country, and eventually he would destroy the world. And then it became self-important, like Hollywood celebrities are known to do. I need to be involved and wanted to be involved. And then it turned in kind of basically insulting, downright insulting. The Twin Towers fell just over there. But we vowed we would not allow terrorists to change our way of lives. So comparing Trump? And remember, the White House gets approval on these things, folks. But comparing Trump to the terrorists who took down the Twin Towers, I don't know. But most notably, his rambling monologue was reminiscent of Biden's own strained attempts at communicating with the public. I owe this city a lot, began De Niro. And that's why it's so weird that Donald Trump is just across the street, because he doesn't belong in my city. I don't know where he belongs, but he certainly doesn't belong here. So I guess De Niro's complaint is that Trump is present for the preposterous criminal trial he's been legally obligated to attend by a Democrat prosecutor. Can you understand the reasoning there? By the end of the presser, those with the misfortune of watching it must have felt the same way Robert Hur did after the dizzying interview with Biden last year. Even when Biden himself is nowhere to be found, his wayward campaign finds a way to highlight his fatal flaws. Against all the available evidence, Biden and his team remain convinced that they can ignore America's substantive policy concerns while leveraging his popularity and Trump's unpopularity among the celebrity class to earn their support. Good luck. You may want to ask Clinton and Kaine how that works out. The truth is that Americans are well aware of Trump's personal failings, and they've already decided they're worth the cost of his policies, considering the alternative. Harping on those failings, especially by way of yet another elderly narcissist outside of a politicized legal proceeding, isn't moving the needle. If Biden's campaign wants to reverse his fortunes at the polls, it needs to abandon unbecoming stunts like the one it pulled on Tuesday and make a positive case for its principle. Here's the only problem with that. The stunts are being pulled out precisely because there is no such case to make. There is no principle. And let's face it, his policies are ever changing on the whims of what he believes the far left voters want. And that's what's hurting him so much in the polls. Think about you. Well, I'm not going to point to you specifically, but think of the person maybe in Pennsylvania or some swing state who works hard every day and is struggling to put groceries on the table. And then they learn, as they watch the nightly news, that their tax dollars, their hard-earned money is going to pay to eliminate the school debt of elitist college students who are currently protesting anti-Semitic, anti-American, Israel-hating protests. Man, I'm struggling this morning. Think of that they're visually seeing that. And yet the best way to overcome policies like that, according to the Biden administration, is to trot out Robert De Niro. So again, I have to pay, as hard as I work, I have to pay for these college kids to push anti-Semitic hate, anti-Israel hate, anti-American hate. This is what Donald Trump said before we go to another break. Typical Trump fashion. I never knew how small, both mentally and physically, wacko former actor Robert De Niro was. Today, De Niro, who suffers from the incurable case of Trump derangement syndrome, commonly known in the medical community as TDS, was met outside the courthouse with a force far greater than the radical left, MAGA. Robert, whose movies, artistry, and brand have gone way down in value since he entered the political arena at the request of crooked Joe Biden, looks so pathetic and sad out there. Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? We got to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here at WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Did you see Michael Cohen is now planning to run for Congress and put out a new book after testifying against Donald Trump? One insider said he was like a walking reality show as he hit a series of parties and hot spots in Long Island. He loves the attention. CNN basically says it's over. Norman Eisen says as of yesterday, the prosecution was ahead on points going into the closing arguments. On what? And Tuesday did not change that calculus. Yes, the closing left off-ramps, such as the question of intent if a juror wants to hang the case. But a hung jury is unlikely. Warning you, folks, that's what they're predicting. Why? Because they realized the fix was in from the beginning. All of the steps, like we talked about earlier, not having an expert witness in there to explain what he was really being charged with, charging a federal charge which Bragg has no jurisdiction over. I mean, the list goes on, and of course the bias of the judge. Ty Cobb, the former Trump administration attorney, told CNN that he believes a guilty verdict is likely. So I think we'll have a verdict Friday afternoon at the latest. It could be Monday, but I think the case could easily be resolved by the weekend. Fridays are usually a trustworthy day to estimate verdict return because jurors typically don't want to spend the weekend on this kind of stuff, and they don't really want to come back the next week. They'll have had 3 full days to consider it. I think that is the likely day. So they said, okay, what do you think the verdict will be? I think it's a combination of things, but primarily it's because the jury instructions almost require it. The judge is not going to instruct any level of intent or knowledge that Trump should have had or must have had with regards to the second crime, the generically referenced campaign finance crimes. So guilty verdict in Trump case likely by Friday. Okay. Also, from some other guests on various shows before we take our last break, defense attorney Randy Zellin was on CNN's News Central and was asked by Kate Boldan, the burden of proof is an important one to remind everyone. It's on the prosecution, right? They need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump broke the law. And you think after listening to all this, you think that fell short. How? Well, Zellin said they fell way short because let's start with reasonable doubt. What is reasonable doubt? And it's not simply a doubt based upon reason. Anytime a human being needs to make an important decision in life, if you have enough information, for example, doctors say you need open heart surgery. Doc, go ahead and schedule. I don't have a reasonable doubt. Conversely, if I say I appreciate it, but I need a second opinion, I need more information. That is having reasonable doubt. There is reasonable doubt all over this case. Where is Keith Schiller? Where is Alan Waslenberg? How did Michael Cohen get away with stealing $30,000? Hold a pity party for him. Made $4 million on this, thought though he'd be chief of staff. He's a fixer. If the plumber comes to my house to fix my leak, I could be home. I don't know what that means. That doesn't mean I know how he's doing it and what it's taking to be fixed. Stormy Daniels, let's hold a pity party for her. Why do you need to know whether or not the former president, and we're not going to get into the graphics. It's simply about, did the former president know the books, his records, false entries for legal fees. Michael Cohen was his lawyer. Getting intent to cover up the election or to protect his family, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Yeah, I mean, the judge allowing some of that salacious detail from Stormy Daniels, just another example of the fix being in. Oh, wow. Last minute waves, but a couple of comments here. I got to keep looking up. Let me take another break. Catch up on these comments. A couple of last minute things to wrap up on. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. And we are back, wrapping things up on our discussion here this morning. Jonathan Turley was on Fox News special report saying, I think that of those options, an acquittal is fast moving outside the realm of possibility. I think it's just extremely unlikely. I think the choice between a hung jury and outright conviction. I still think that this is such a weak case, one has to give a nod to the hung jury. But if there is a conviction, and that would not necessarily surprise many of us, no, I don't think that this could make it through an appeal before the election. You can't just leap over the New York appellate system, try to get the Supreme Court. There are many, in my view, reversible errors here. I think they are very serious. I think Merchant is not going to be able to correct all of them in these instructions. Every indication is that so far is that these instructions will greatly favor the prosecution, of course. And yeah, the appeal won't happen until after the election. He also said there was a huge disadvantage in the system of having the defense go first. For most of us who don't practice here, it's almost unthinkable because it means the defense can't respond to some of these really sweeping statements, in my view, improper statements being made by the prosecutors. They also have an advantage by going long today. They may try to run this towards 8. The last thing the jury will hear before instructions will be an hour of their closing arguments. That is ideal for the prosecutors. So the fix is in. You can see so many people saying, folks, and it's just keep this in mind when you hear what happens. Even people that would be more towards Trump's side politically saying, because of all the things going against Trump, being in New York, the judge, the improper way the instructions were given to the jurors, the list goes on and on and on, that is probably not going to be in Trump's favor. So keep that in mind. Fox News' Greg Jarrett, I thought, had a really good kind of piece at the end. He had an article said, Trump's defense dismantles prosecution's imaginary crimes, but the jury listened. That's the issue. Was the jury already biased? Were they already tainted? I think that's a fair question to be had. Do you trust them when they weren't even allowed to have a witness, an expert witness, explain what they're really charging Trump with? This case was never about criminality or fidelity to the law. This was a grotesque pretext. Bragg's scheme was to manipulate the legal system by bringing specious criminal charges to damage or delegitimize Trump's candidacy for president. It is classic lawfare, weaponizing statutes not because of the law being broken, but because the accused poses a political threat. But the real threat is found in unscrupulous prosecutors like Alvin Bragg, who have forsaken their duty to see that justice is done. Armed with immense power, they become a law unto themselves. Creating the illusion of wrongdoing to annul Trump is the end that justifies any means. The legendary U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis put it best when he said the greatest dangers to liberty lurk in insidious encroachment by men of zeal. That description fits Alvin Bragg like a glove. Under color of law, he seeks to oppress. And where law ends, tyranny begins. It is now up to the jury to correct a manifest injustice. Do you believe that they had enough information to do that? Were they given, well, was it a fair trial? Did the jury listen? Again, I think a lot of people are warning you, be cautious, because it sounds like it may not go in Trump's favor. What happens if Trump is convicted in New York? No one can really say, says CBS News. Okay. Hey, Marco Rubio wants to be Trump's vice president, but he doesn't want to audition. That's why you haven't seen him at the trials. What do you think? I don't know. I was always surprised by Marco Rubio being on there. By the way, did you see how much RFK Jr. paid to get on New York's ballot? He is paying $90 per hour for people to get signatures. So $1.1 million just to secure ballot access in New York. And now he's taking that to the court. And that is it. We are out of time. Thank you to our guests, Elisa and Robert, for telling us all about Colonial Days and Paint and Post. Really appreciate that. I hope you have a great day, and join us tomorrow morning starting at 6 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox, have a great day, everyone, and we will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early. I look forward to it already.